G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. It is our final podcast going through the positions each week. Today we are finishing it off with the Rucks. Lots to talk about for a position where we only have two players, but we are going to get stuck into it. Let's go!
Just done it from nowhere. Blasted the goal from inside the 30. Shade from the boundary. Dusty. The legend becomes immortal.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy. And today, joined as always by Luke Rogerson, we're talking Rucks, talking the big fellas.
I wasn't expecting to be excited by this, but doing a little bit of research this morning, I thought this is a position where there's some moving and shaking to be made, isn't there? So I'm pretty excited.
This time last year, the Rucks were the forward line of this year. There was not much to choose from, but from that, we got obviously two huge performances from Tim English and Rowan Marshall, which, played every single game last year. Both rose their average by, I think, more than 20 points each, or close to thereabouts, and were genuine captain options every week. So we might have a similar story this year. We might not. There's lots to talk about. Lots of interesting players to discuss today.
There's a few different ways you can go, and that makes it intriguing.
So we'll get stuck right into it because we've only got a few players to play about, but I want to spend some time on each of these options. We're going to start at the very top, however, with the highest averaging player, not just Ruckman, of the season last year, and that is Tim English. He averaged 118.5 points last year. Like I mentioned, played every single game last year, and just really took it to another level. It kind of reminded me of prime Brody Grundy in a way, and the fact that he was like an extra midfielder around the ground. A lot of people are kind of writing him off a little bit, I think, at the moment because he is so expensive. But of all those players who average as high as or over the 110, English almost strikes me as the player who's the most likely to repeat what he did. However, we should mention that early in the preseason he's had some migraines.
Well, I'm no
training.
doctor, but I got to the bottom of it. He's got migraines because he can't fucking work out who Bevo's putting in the midfield around him. He looks down and goes, "Why the fuck are you here?"
Hold on. Caleb Daniels?
And looks out to me, "Oh, you've been Bevo'd, McRae." Unfucking lucky. So that's why he's got a headache. I've worked it out. But
that would drive us all to have migraines every day, I reckon.
The thing is your Ruckman even a Ruckman if he's not a midfielder these days? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that feels like the thing these days.
Especially fantasy-wise. Like all the best Ruckmen over the last 5-6 years effectively are doing midfield things and then just give them 30 points on top of that for their hit-outs.
Yeah.
So
I'm
probably a little sort of different opinion to you there in terms of potentially starting English. Like he's priced at 118, and yes, there's every chance that he does that and potentially even more just the way he goes about things. But we've got a line here where we've got like three guys that I can potentially see going 20 or more points of upside. It's the opportunity cost of you pick English, that's fantastic, you lock him away, but what could you have spent that money on elsewhere when there's value to be had in the Rucks this year?
And this might lead us to a bit more of like a sort of like structured debate in terms of previous years. We talk about set and forget strategy, and I might lump in his running mate here, Rowan Marshall, into the conversation as well, because both these guys were enormous scorers. And the interesting thing to me this season is that both those players don't have an early round bye. They both don't play, obviously, opening round. So the players that you're alluding to, which we will talk about later, do have opening round buys. And so you've got two players who are genuine captain options who, again, you talk about Rucks being, I guess, tag-proof in a way compared to some of our midfielders.
Imagine that.
Imagine tagging a Ruckman.
Is there someone who could... I mean, Blissarves might be...
Maybe.
The only bloke who could potentially tag a Ruck.
I mean, I don't think you'd be tagging Ron Marshall, but maybe English.
But yeah, how times have changed. Imagine having this discussion 40 years ago. Tagging a Ruckman.
So their floor is extremely high. They're going to be players, or at least I believe English is going to be a player that you're going to want to have in your team at some point. the old set and forget strategy was obviously you plug those guys in, you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the season.
Yep.
You've only got 2 players in that position, so just lock down the best 2 and don't worry about it. So it's interesting to me that I don't think it's getting discussed very much in the AFL fantasy community. And look, whilst I agree that there's some really good options outside of that, in a year where those guys don't play the early round buys, I think maybe it's at least worth thinking about.
Yeah, something I was thinking about this morning, I'm going to sort of fumble my way through this, but I think you'll know what I mean. Is the typical way that you go about your upgrades is that you generate cash from your rookies and your mid prices. You cash in that cash, and you probably put it on the top of the head of a mid pricer. And you typically will go to try and find that underpriced premium. So it's not like you necessarily
You're
going
straight to the top.
So this is something that I was thinking about this morning. Is let's say English and Marshall for whatever reason just keep humming and they don't come down.
It's more than likely going to happen.
And what then happens if you try to upgrade? Let's say you're trying to upgrade this mid pricer to one of these guys, and you don't have the cash. Does then it have to become like a double week thing? I can see it going. Whereas
it might be something you have to wait till the bias. When you've got that 2 down, 1 up kind of thing.
It's just something that was rolling around in my head, and I know I didn't articulate it very well then, but I just thought on a lot of other lines, that upgrade will be to a person on that line that you think is an underpriced premium. Whereas in the ruck line, obviously, we're just naturally shorter on options, and where does that kind of leave you? So
think about our season last year. We both started with, hold on. I started with Wits. You ended up with Wits after a couple of rounds. And the only reason we were able to get an English into our team was because of a late out of Joe Witts, and we traded across to an English. If that hadn't have happened,
our seasons would have been even more fucked.
Who knows when we would have got English? It might not have been till the bye rounds or something like that where we would be able to get him in. And a lot of people had that trouble last season of like going weeks and weeks and weeks without Tim English. And that was very difficult for them to overcome. So if you replay that scenario and you start with some of these cheaper guys and you are trying to get up to that English, you might have to prepare yourself to be without a player like him for half the season, essentially, which is it's a daunting thought.
It's an interesting discussion as well. The other thing, you mentioned Rowan Marshall before. All the talk is English, and rightly so. He averaged 118. He was the highest averaging player in the game. English went under 100 8 times. Not too bad, and they were effectively all in the 90s. But guess how many times Rowan Marshall went under 100?
I want to say once or twice.
4.
4, yeah.
So it's like, 4, but it's still, he's had effectively as good a season. He averaged, 1 less, 2 less.
Yeah.
And of those 4, 2 of them were sub 90.
Yeah.
But man, he had a good season too. Like, there's no discounting what he did.
He also had a couple games where he was subbed or managed down the end of the game. Like, I remember there was that round 4 game against the Suns where they didn't have Jared Witts in there. He had 107 in 3 quarters.
Yeah.
He didn't play the 4th quarter and got subbed out.
His last 3 games, 131, 141, 132.
Monster scores. It was really his first game of the season, round 1, where he scored 72. Was the only real game where he went under 80. And there's just some huge scores in here. And for both of these guys, it doesn't seem like there's anything different. Like, the teams are the same. There's no... Like, Jordan Sweet's not even there for Tim English to really threaten him.
He wasn't there last year either. But
he wasn't there last. But, like, the threat of him coming into the team is not there.
Yeah.
It's... more or less the same for them both.
It's intriguing.
This season. So.
I don't know how many people will, but I would love to see how a set and forget English Marshall combination plays out for a season. If somebody starts with it, I just love to see where that kind of puts them. I don't think too many people will do it. But
last thing before we move on from here.
Yeah.
Say you are rolling right now with a Bontempelli or Jordan Dawson or even an Andrew Brayshaw in your M1.
Yeah.
What's to say that we don't go, instead of that guy as your M1 as your captain option, but we go with a Ruck as our captain option, as a bit of a unique play, a bit of a, you go that more expensive midfielder down to a cheaper midfielder and get at least one of your Rucks up to one of these guys as an option. Do you think that there's some credibility in that?
I think depending on who the person is, it will be where those people deem the value is. Do you know what I mean? If you're looking to do that, then obviously in your mind you deem that there's somebody with better value in the midfield that you can get on than there is in the ruck line. That's the kind of way I see it. Is if you're looking to lock in that captain option on either line, well, what are you getting on the upper line?
Yeah.
And
What's the
what value
mid-price
do you,
or whatever?
Exactly. So if you deem Grundy as 30 points unders, but you can only find a midfielder that you deem as 20-point unders, then I mean...
You sacrifice 10 points there.
Yeah, if that's the way that you're seeing it. It'll depend person to person, but...
Yeah, and I think the early round buys will be something that also factors into
True.
that. So let's go on and start to talk about those cheaper Ruckmen that do give us some value. And I want to start with we'll go by price order essentially.
Yeah.
I want to start with Max Gawn, who is, the creme de la creme over the last 10 years of Ruckman. He's been a staple in our fantasy sides for many years. He was the old leader of the set and forget Rucks. And he finds himself for the first time in, I want to say about 3 or 4 years, being basically a sole ruck. Previously, obviously last year he had Grundy.
Yep.
The 2 years prior to that, he had Luke Jackson in there as well. But this year, neither of those players are there. Like, who is their secondary ruck?
I mean, I don't know.
I've got no idea either. It's going to be, it's one of their key forwards will maybe Van Ruwen will have to step in there and do some ruck work.
There's a fair few teams that are going with that, with the solo ruckman and then just the guy who can give you a little chop out, know, and that ruckman's going to do 80, 90% CBAs. I mean, in the 6 games without Grundy, 113. Fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's close to that. And then the interesting thing is, like, take yourself back to the patch between 2018 and 2021. So Gawn effectively averaged 111 across those 3 seasons, and in the COVID year, averaged 100, which is so that's just, those are monumental numbers,
huge numbers.
32 years old. So where do you sit with that? Because I know you're very hard and fast.
Yes, I don't love my over 30s. However, this is maybe
he picks and chooses.
This is maybe the exception. Now, there's a lot of talk about rucks. Like they're on a different timeline to everyone else. They're going to grow into their bodies and all this sort of stuff.
You don't reckon Gawney's grown into his body yet? You reckon he's got more to give?
Look, I'm willing to give Max Gawn the benefit of the doubt because the situation is so vastly different. He's priced at, what is he priced at? 92 on a CBA percentage of last season at 65%. 65%.
He is a safe 20 points of upside if he is like an 80, 90% main ruckman guy.
I believe so. And that puts him into that 110 plus category, which is a captain option. And those are the types where, like, that's a Rowan Marshall of last season. Like, those are the types that dramatically shape your season. And to me, he is, like, he's the guy that I, like, previously, just to reveal my team, we're going to do a team reveal later, but for a long time this preseason, I had Grundy in there and Xerri.
Yeah.
Before Xerri's injury, I replaced Grundy with Gawn.
The facial.
So I've gone, I reckon of all the
Did you say before?
Yeah.
Oh,
I know. So
turn it up.
Reveal it later. But
before.
But
sure you did.
No, I replaced Grundy with Gawn.
So sorry.
Yeah. So I think Gawn of all the players is, a lot of people are deciding, okay, do I go Xerri or do I go Gawn?
Yeah.
I think we should be deciding, should we go Grundy or Xerri?
Well, this is
I think Gawn is
Grundy,
the player that you put in there first.
Grundy priced at 75. It depends. What do you think he's going to give us? If he gives us 95, that's 20 points of upside. But we're pretty confident that if Max goes into the middle and does his thing, he's 20 points.
20 points of upside if you finish at 110. And 20 points of upside if you finish at 95 are two different things.
I'm taking the 110.
Because the guy that finishes at 110, you don't really need to upgrade him. He is a set and forget.
Yeah.
And there's a world where I see that you could potentially say that Max Gawn is the second highest averaging ruck.
Yeah.
I don't think no one should, turn their nose up at that.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is just a more safer bet. Plus, we've seen him do it more recently.
Yes.
Like you referenced when Grundy went out last year. He went over 110, 111, 113, and there were some monster scores in there. The first game where Grundy was out of the side, he went 162.
Poor Grundy gets dropped. He's fuck, I hope Max just takes it easy. Please, Max, don't fucking screw me. And he goes, I'll go 150, thanks.
He's also got a 4 in his score baked into his average last year. He got injured. One of his teammates fell on his leg. So that 4 is baked into his score as well. So even if you just take that one game out, his average, he should have averaged a 97. So
So
you've even got that baked in there.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of things pointing to me the fact that he is going to go absolutely huge this season. And the last thing I'll say before we move on to Grundy is that his run to start the beginning of the season, I believe, is actually pretty juicy as well. So he comes up against Western Bulldogs, which is Tim English, but we know that they also give up points to Ruckman. Hawthorn is probably his only tough matchup of that group. Last year they were a tougher matchup for Rucks. Then he's got Port Adelaide, and the Brisbane Lions. Now, Brisbane were historically tough for Rucks.
Except he went like 150.
But last year, the second half last year, they were actually one of the easiest matchups for Ruckman. So I think the Big O is starting to slow down a little bit there. And Max, feasts on them. So
we're both in agreement. We reckon we're going to see Max Gawn.
Maximum Gawn. Yes, we are. Absolutely. I do think we'll see that. So my question to you is he in your team right now?
Not currently,
Okay.
but doing the research that I was doing this morning, there were fucking things flying everywhere in my brain in terms of the Ruck. So
yes.
nobody's safe.
Let's talk about his ex-teammate and the other side of the Grundy combination.
Yep.
Brody Grundy. Now, he obviously he's the Ruck pig.
Yep.
Back-to-back 120s back in his day.
My goodness.
However, it was a little while ago. I mean, 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
Since then, now 2020, he went 90.9 in a COVID year, so that's probably a big score. I think roughly, 110-ish.
Yeah.
2021, 106.5.
Yep.
2022, only played the 6 games and a 93.3 average. Last year, obviously, 75, which is where he's priced at.
Well, this is the thing, and you've stolen all my points, but you've painted the narrative that I wanted to paint. So, 2019, the guy went over 148 times.
Oh, monster
what the
numbers.
fuck is that?
Yeah.
And then, so COVID, okay, that's disruptive for everyone, but he's had a good COVID average.
Decent average, yeah.
2021, he goes 106. If he goes 106 this year, that is a winning pick from 75.
What was that,
That's
30
points of upside.
Yes.
Okay. And then 2022, he gets injured after whatever it was, 5 games.
Yes.
Okay. And then in 2023, this might be a strong word, but it may be the way that it was a little embarrassing. That's not me saying it was, but maybe from the way he felt. He's a fucking...
He's the perception of he's fallen from grace in terms of the public perception.
He is an absolute star of the competition, and to have what happened last season happen, that would have knocked his pride a little bit, perhaps.
Yes.
So I reckon he's gone to Sydney. He's going, guess what? Fuck you all. I'm going to lock in. I'm the number 1 Ruck here, and I'm going to show you guys. So I can sell myself on the narrative of Brody Grundy
easily. Yeah,
he's only 29.
Yeah,
you just said Max Gawn's got us.
He's got years left. He's in his
Ruckmen
prime.
don't peak till they're 40.
So look, I'm following everything you're
know what I
saying here. To piggyback off that point, even when he got the opportunity, so Max Gawn missed 4 games last season.
Yep.
Well, he missed 3, but the fourth one,
yeah.
he basically was out from the start of the game. So in those games, he went 95, 106, 119, 81. So that's probably, on average, a low 100 kind of average across 4 games there. You combine that with the 93 that he averaged, that's where that gives us about that 95, 96 kind of mark for him to go. Now, I do want to reference that 2022 season, before he got injured and before we started to see Darcy Cameron come in and then Collingwood got their ideas of we don't actually need this guy, is even before he went down, he wasn't looking like the Brody Grundy that we know and love.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the game and the pace of the game of the last few years, because he was always a guy who's like the 4th midfielder or whatever he is.
Yeah.
I wonder if that pace of the game being faster than it is today, like the stand rule, which obviously when he was going 120s, the stand rule was not a thing. I wonder if that pace of play is to the detriment of someone like a Brody Grundy. And how much so? Like, obviously, we're not expecting to go 120, I don't think.
No, I think that would be...
But is it 95? Is it 100? Is it 105? Like, where do we kind of have him pegged?
I think if you're someone with the skill of Brody Grundy, and you're the number 1 ruck at your team, you're not sharing that ruck except for the occasional chop out.
Yeah.
You have to go 100. Like, we've got guys that do that are not necessarily the talent of Brody Grundy that go...
Nank,
yeah. I mean, Nank. We love Nank. Like, we
he's
absolutely
no
love
Brody
Nank, but he's
Grundy.
no Brody Grundy.
Yeah.
So, and he's effectively done that at Richmond, if not better. I just don't see a world where if he's healthy, if he's that 80 to 90% ruck guy.
Yep.
I don't see a world where he goes less than 100. But the thing is, I'm not sure about the pace of the game thing. I wasn't playing fantasy when he was, being an absolute pig. So I wasn't watching him as closely. But my perception of it is that he was effectively just doing what English does. Like, he'd lay a few tackles, he'd get some of those short 45 kicks and then dish off. Like, he was involved in the run and carry that Collingwood. Or was he like getting some chippy stuff? Like, do you?
Well, there was a particular game that I remember. It was against the Brisbane Lions where he laid 0 tackles and had 0 marks as well, and that ended up with a score of 54, which was.
Are you talking about this is early
2022, which is just before his injury. So this is a full game. He scored 54 points that game, 26 hit-outs, 14 disposals. So
I think we were at, or I was at that game. Were we there together?
I don't remember, to be honest. I think I might have been at home because I remember swearing at the TV, I think. But it's just games like that have me a little bit. I have a bit more hesitancy to say that Brody Grundy is going to be the Brody Grundy we all remember than I do saying that Max Gawn will be the dominant Max Gawn that we've seen more recently. That's my only flag, which is why if I had to pick between the two...
Well, do you have to pick between the two?
Well, that's the thing. Maybe you don't have to. But if you had to pick between the two and you were so gung-ho on this next guy that we're going to talk about, I personally would side on the Max Gawn side of things if I'm picking between the two. But like you said, we might not have to pick between the two. Last thing on Brody Grundy that I do want to put out, which might be actually in his favour. If we talk about ruck contests and how many ruck contests there were, if we compare his last season with Collingwood, where he did average extremely well, which was 2021. The total ruck contests for them, as I've just completely lost my stat, the total ruck contests for them were actually last in the comp. They were dead last with 78.6.
And he averaged 106 at you.
And he averaged 106. Sydney last season averaged 94 ruck contests.
Sorry, how many did you say Collingwood had?
78. So you've got basically 16 more ruck contests per game. So the amount of opportunity compared to Collingwood, where he went 106 versus Sydney, is actually probably better at Sydney. And people, sometimes talk about the smaller ground, the narrow, skinnier ground at the SCG. So that may be something you could lean towards as a bit of a positive for him.
Very interesting. Should we
let's talk about the next guy here. But before we do, make sure you guys give us a big old thumbs up on the YouTube if you are watching over there. And make sure if you are listening over to the podcast on audio, give us a 5-star rating and review, and drop a little comment in there, and we will read out some really good ones on the next podcast, guys. So do that, and we'll be forever grateful. All right, next guy. This was...
This pick was like a lay down Xerri before
the
Is that the right phrase?
I believe you. You say it confidently, and
I did say it confidently.
Yeah, it sounded very intelligent.
I'm going to Google it if I can spell it.
No, I don't think you can. I'll tell you something here, Luke.
Okay, tell me something while I'm doing this.
He was my first pick in my team when I went to go down, and when was it, December 16th, or when the game first opened months ago. Tristan Xerri was the first player picked in my fantasy classic side.
I think I got it right. Lay down Xerri, an absolute certainty.
Wow, there you go. He was your guy last year.
Wow, there you go.
Bring it back. Yeah, really,
you
really
condescending
shocked.
prick, you. He was your first picked.
He was my first picked.
I don't blame you.
I don't have scars, but I want to talk to someone who does potentially have scars with Tristan Xerri, who obviously started in last year, injured in that first quarter. It was a painful time for you.
But this is the absolute thing that if you're going to have something like this happen, you want it to happen like this, because guess what I can do? I can sit back and go, oh, that guy was on track for he was averaged this points per minute, average 140.
Points per minute.
I would have won a Hilux if he didn't go down. That's perfect. I'll happily spread that narrative.
Yeah.
So as much as it hurt, I was kind of like, it was, I think I said it at the time, I felt like I was vindicated in the pick by his first quarter. I was like, well, this guy's the number one ruck. He's doing what I expected him to do. And, I mean, you can't account for injuries sometimes, can you? Yep. Not with players that don't have these.
Oh, exactly. I mean, and someone just fell in his leg. He did, was it the sin that he had? And then,
the mighty sin,
and then that was it. So, if you were keen on him last year, you started him last year. This year, he is cheaper than last year.
But he doesn't have a face.
He does, well, we'll get to that in a second. Yeah. But the risk last year was Goldstein was waiting in the wings. Now, you started him last year because Goldstein wasn't named round 1.
Yeah.
Now Goldstein's not there at all. Like he's in a different club.
Ciao.
So I mean, we'll talk about his face in a second, but there is no one really there to chop him out outside of Coleman Jones, who I don't think is much chop as a ruckman. I think he's more of a forward. So, like, he is it. He's their guy there. So if you thought he was value last season, he's even more value this season. And no early buy. So obviously the Grundy Gawn combination, you've got to deal with that early buys. Yes. Round 5 and round 6. Tristan Xerri, you don't have to worry about that. But let's talk about his face. He's gone and fucked it up. He's gone and broke his face.
He has gone and he's had a facial fracture. So he's at the Oxongs at the minute, despite the facial fracture, because you don't need a face to play footy, do you? Like,
well, not a ruck.
Legs and arms.
Legs and arms. You tackle.
You get him like a mask thing with just some little peepholes.
Oh yeah. Do the whole what's the Hector? I'm thinking Hannibal Lecter. Yeah. I was like, Hannibal Lecter going on. Yeah. So
we'll get him something like that. He'll be NBA players always.
Oh yeah, the mask Kobe kind of thing. Yeah. I think that actually gives you a bit of a bump.
I think players like to wear that.
It's a bit of a villain vibe.
Oh, cut my lip. Can I get bring the mask out?
Yeah, make me look cool. So are you not worried about the facial fracture? The reports that I've seen is he is not in doubt for round 1, but he is sidelined for a number of weeks throughout the preseason.
I think I would find it really hard if I didn't see anything from him in the practice matches. That would be my heart would be saying, like, yes, I think it's a really good pick, but my head would be, all the stuff that you listen to and all the stuff that you read about is like, don't make that risque pick on a guy that might have been injured and you haven't seen much from. Yeah. So I feel like I would have to steer away in that instance. But at the minute, he's, let's just say he's a placeholder at the minute. I'm still...
Yeah, so the wording out of the club is the fact that he copped an elbow to the face and he's going under the knife to have a plate inserted into his cheekbone, I think, which is sounds pretty gnarly. He won't miss much running time, so his fitness you would expect. But
you don't run with your face.
No, that's a very good point. But he won't be returning to contact for any time soon. It depends how long his face heals, which I
wonder if they have to put him in one of those like cones.
The dog cones.
Yeah, like, don't scratch your face, Tristan. There's a plate in there now.
I think that's more for licking your nuts, but I don't think you have to worry too much about that.
Where do you get the plate inserted?
So one to monitor. I too, like you, if he doesn't play like a preseason game, it's going to be hard to pick him when we've got those other good options there.
It is tough, especially, you've sold me on Gawn a little bit too. So it means spending a little bit more cash, but...
A bit more cash, and it also means that you've got 2 players with an opening, with an early buy, and in the ruck department where you're probably not going to be able to cover them too much either. So I think the flow-on effect is to be even more selective with players outside of your rucks on those round 5 and round 6 buy players, like your Taylor Adams, like your... I don't know who else we're considering there, but those players there, James Jordan, all those kind of guys, Nick Dacos as well. So it just, to me, makes it a little bit more difficult to get those 22 players on the field for every one of those 6 rounds early on. But previous injury, like, I had him kind of slated to go. I think he could easily go 90 plus. There's a world where I could see him going as high as 95. If I took a bit of a page out of Calvinator's book and I took out some scores here and there. Round 1, you said, went down in the first game.
26 in like half a quarter or something.
We extrapolate that a little bit. Times that by 4.
Times it by 8, mate. That guy was on fire.
Look, I won't go too nuts, but I'll go times it by 4.
Don't go nuts. That's where he got his surgery.
Get a cone on my head. He had 2 other games where Goldstein didn't play. So if I extrapolate that first game, add those other 2 games in, he averages 96.
Yeah.
And has a points per minute of 1.03, which was higher than both Max and Grundy last season.
You're a fucking statistician, mate. The old 3-game sample size extrapolated by game.
Yeah, so...
Mitch Popowski.
I think there's a world where he comes out and he goes mid-90s. Now, price at 64, like you said, it is actually... It's a decent amount cheaper than Brody Grundy. He's 10 points cheaper than a Brody Grundy, who we already consider to be very cheap. So he quite easily could be about 30 points of upside compared to Grundy's maybe 20 to 25. Plus, he's got no early round bye. So, but again, this facial injury just throws another spanner in the works.
I don't see it happening, but the data does suggest that he's not a good sharer. So if there is a world where, for whatever reason, North Melbourne decide to... No joke. No joke. No joke, but he just didn't share well. Like when Goldie came back in and they kind of split the ruck duties up, it was dog shit for the last 4 rounds of the season. So it wasn't 59, 53, 54, 47. Like, that's rubbish. So I don't see it happening, but if there was a world where it happened...
Yeah. And like, say, for example, we see in the preseason, like they do like this Darcy Cameron, Mason Cox kind of situation where they do like a 60-40 split where Coleman Jones comes in there. Like, then
Still no good.
That's a red flag, and we'll probably go with those other boys. So,
yeah.
Definitely one to watch. I'm a little bit less enthusiastic before then. Now, with the Brody, Grundy, and Max Gawn combination, say we was lock that in.
Yeah.
I want to get your thoughts on the potential of starting someone like a Jordan Sweet, not at R2 or R1, but at R3. Was he like 300? Like 300, was he 380K?
380K, yeah. So 42.
So
price.
we're missing 2 of those big dogs early in the season through their bye rounds.
Yep.
Jordan Sweet has no early bye. He could plug and play each of those 2 rounds. Is that worth it, really, to pay up 180,000 on your bench?
It doesn't give you a nice feeling, but let's say, again, I don't see this happening because they brought Soldo across.
Yes.
But let's say for whatever reason, Sweet was the number 1 guy in there and Soldo wasn't playing. I don't see it happening. Then I think it would almost be a have to kind of pick.
Yeah, I think if he was solo rucking it.
Because we've seen, like I said before, so if you're a solo ruck guy, you'd have to fall over yourself not to go 90.
Yeah.
And he actually got a little bit of form in the VFL.
He's not a bad ruckman.
Apparently the servers were down on the website I was trying to use. I couldn't find the VFL data, so I was scrolling through game by game on the Footy Live app, and I was seeing hundreds, 120, high 90s. Started the season pretty poorly, but
and that like those numbers translate better for ruckman. I think because
sometimes the hit out numbers I think are inflated because you're playing against some Terry
you're not going
topper,
up against,
but the
you're around the ball, you're tackling.
That's it.
If
you're one of those type of ruckmans, I think they translate well. He did have high hitouts, but like I said, if you'd have to fall over yourself not to go 80 or 90, and if that's the case, then you've got a guy that you put on your bench for 380 who's potentially...
He's going to make you a bunch of cash and cover you.
Where are your thoughts? I don't see it happening without Soldo.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I think it's going to be hard to go Soldo ruck without... Ivan there.
Was that it?
Yes. Come on, give credit.
You got to give me a look. I always give you a look after I've made one so that I know you're on.
I don't think it's gonna be difficult for him to push Ivan Soldo out into the twos.
It's good, man.
That was a pity. I don't think that it's likely, and I think in that situation will be the only situation where I would pay that much money to have on my bench. I don't think I could do it if both of them are playing in round 1. So I haven't really given it too much.
Yeah, for what it's worth as well. I know we have the early round buys, but for what it's worth, it might not allow you to loop in rounds
5 and 6.
Yeah, when we have
the regular buys
when you have a full complement.
Yes,
because he might be a playing ruck, or you'd be picking him as
I get what you're saying. Yeah. And the other thing is if you get him in for rounds to cover rounds 5 and 6, who's to say he's there? You
could be put in a really shit spot.
Couldn't you? And who's to say he's even playing at that time? Maybe they do go with solo Soldo, and that's your whole plan's gone kaput because of that.
And the other thing too is on the ruck line, it's how do I put it? It's hard to weasel your way out of things.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's nowhere to go in a lot of these instances. That's another point that I was going to bring up is if you go...
if you have a Xerri
someone like Xerri, well, this is the thing is let's say, God forbid, Xerri comes out, fractures the other half of his face or something. This is where do you go? I had to fucking fall over myself. Yeah. I had to make mid-round 1 trades.
Yeah, you cooked yourself.
To go fucking Dawson to Hayden Young just to make sure I had enough cash to get to fucking Jared Witts. And then one Jared Witt weren't English. So... Yeah. You could be in a lot of strife. Yeah,
it is difficult to tinker around if they do go bad. So, yes. Let's talk about draft and where we'd rank these guys. We'll go through these pretty quickly, but I think in my draft rankings, I do have Tim English in a tier of his own at tier 1. Some might argue that Rowan Marshall is right there behind him and in tier 1. You might argue that. I don't really know why I've got Tim English in a tier of his own. I just think that he's... I don't know. I feel like he's more of an integral part of their team. Rowan Marshall is there, but I don't think they want to give it to him. He just kind of finds it in a way. I don't know.
Put some respect on
Maybe
Romar's name.
I'm wrong there, but I just see Tim English as a 120 player. And he's just a gun. I think he's a tier in his own. Tier 2, I've got Rowan Marshall still second, but they also have Max Gawn joining him in that tier. And I do see a world where Max Gawn actually averages more than Rowan Marshall. I'm not predicting it, but I do see a world where that is the case. So I think that they are clear your top 3. Tier 3, I think there is a bit of a drop by about 10 to 15 points or so. I've got Brody Grundy at 4, Sean Darcy at 5, and Kieran Briggs at 6. Darcy nearly averaged 100 last season. Had a few injuries, so you have to take that into consideration as well. And Briggsy came in and just dominated the ruck and made it his own. So I think he is, this is sort of like that 95 to 100 kind of a range. So I think that he is in there. Any thoughts on Darcy or Briggs sort of being in that group with Brody Grundy at all?
No, I think Briggs has shown at the end of last year that he's actually a pretty safe kind of guy, especially when he's got that number 1 ruck mantle.
Flynn's gone now.
Yeah. Darcy Cameron can give you a stinker on any given day. I'd probably
later.
Yeah. Sorry, Shawnee Darcy.
Sean Darcy.
Yeah. If Shawnee Darcy stays healthy, then he's
the health is the main thing. He averaged nearly 100, so by average, I probably have him the highest of these 3, but I've just ducked him down a bit,
which is fair enough, I think. And I think it's pretty locked in that he's the main ruck guy over there, which is interesting for Luke Jackson.
Luke Jackson,
Luke Jackson, but that's he chose to go there. So,
what's decision
with draft this year? There are actually like a few good ruck options getting around, I think. So where are you drafting these guys?
That's a good question. I think Tim English is number 1. He's the number 1 pick in.
Really?
I think he's going to average the most points out of any player.
Yeah,
he's in that ruck.
Okay.
You just square it away. You got a captain option, then you can start to search and hunt for those mids where you're going to need a lot of.
What about the migraines?
The migraines.
They can be debilitating.
I'm not too worried about the migraines. He did his hammy last season.
Have you ever had a migraine?
I have, yeah. Terrible.
Yeah,
they suck.
You couldn't play footy with it.
You get over it, though, in a week. I think the concern with him with holding him out of training was they were concerned the migraines was a result of his concussion.
Yeah.
I think they've since, and from what I've seen, they've since said that was not the case, and they were being cautious. And so now he's pretty much going to go back into full contact training, is what I've seen. So I'm not too worried about the migraines now that we know that it wasn't a result of concussions. But, knock on wood, hopefully that's the case. I'd probably then go maybe Dacos at pick 2. I'd probably would then go 3 and 4 Marshall Gawn. I think all those guys go really high there, just because I do think there is a pretty substantial gap between Max Gawn and Brody Grundy at the next spot. Or at least my confidence in that being the case.
So you're going Dacos before...
I think so.
Just because he's a defender.
He's a defender. I expect him to go 110 to 115.
So he's in line with the midfielders. And you're
going to pick 3, multiple defenders. You're picking 1 ruck. But I do think that Rowan Marshall and Max Gawn should be basically the first half of your first round.
Yeah, wow.
And then maybe these next rucks, maybe second or third round probably is where I'm picking them.
Who was that good ruck you picked up in your keeper league?
We're not going to talk about him. We're not talking about old mate.
Say his name.
Sammy Draper.
The Raper. Sammy Draper.
Big keeper. Breakout season.
Bro.
Todd Goldstein is there to mentor him along. Just give him that little push.
Bro, I'm not backing you in that keeper league. The Raper Draper.
We're not putting all our chips in the ruck department there.
Oh, my goodness.
To keep going on, number 7, I've got a faller here in Toby Nankervis. Now, he was the 3rd averaging ruck last season, averaged over 100, and this might be very low for a lot of people, but if we look back at his averages over the past few years, he's typically an 80 guy, and he's also someone who I think for the past few seasons has led the comp in frees against as well. He's very, very high up there as a lot of Richmond players. But prior to last season, he went 85.6, 83.4. He's also someone who struggles to stay healthy a lot as well. Now, you might say there's no Soldo there, but I still just have a hard time believing he's going to back that up, just when his history suggests he's more of that 80s guy. So I've got him more low 90s, dropping about sort of 8 to 10 points per game. So I have him in tier number 4. Then I've got Tristan Xerri and Jared Witts. So this is kind of that low 90s range is where I have about these guys. And then in tier 5, by himself, at number 10, I've got Darcy Cameron, and that kind of ends the confident ruck line. You might throw in Oscar McInerney and stuff like that, but Sam Draper, he's probably more tier 2, but...
tier 22.
Tier 22. But yeah, I think after that, like those top 9, I'm pretty confident they're all pretty much solo or clear number 1 rucks. I probably wouldn't want to rely on getting someone like a Darcy Cameron because I do feel like any given day, sometimes Mason Cox goes in there, weirdly enough. But yeah, I think.
How many teams normally in a draft league? Can it be
10 to 12? I mean,
imagine if you're number
standard.
11 or 12 and you get somebody that's not one of those guys in the ruck.
I'd be a bit nervous rolling out like those ones. But last year, I think I won our draft competition and I had someone like Oscar McInerney. I drafted Bruce at the time and that went up in flames. But so you can do it. I mean, it just means that you've just got to fade that to the very end of your draft because people aren't obviously looking to draft those guys. So you get them really late. But yeah, that's where I have the draft rankings for Ruckman.
Beautiful. That was a good episode in terms of discussion. I think I'm intrigued to see what people have to say in the comments because there's so many different ways you can go with the rucks.
I think the forward line and your ruck line in Classic are going to dictate the rest of your team in terms of structure. Like how much money you're spending in the rucks, how much money you're spending in the forwards, and from there, the other lines will kind of take care of themselves. But I do think that they are probably our most important lines this season. That will do it for us today, guys. Make sure as well, if you have enjoyed the podcast and all our previews for the positions, give this video a big thumbs up. Hit that big old subscribe button. Ring the bell so you're notified every time our videos come up. Next podcast, we are going to be doing a team reveal. Revealing the boys over here. So I know all of you guys
very nice, very good.
No question about it. I'm ready to get hurt again.
Which
maybe.
Very nice.
You stick to your side over there, mate. But until next time there, guys, we'll catch you guys in the next podcast. Later.